Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of the 1974 horror classic Black Christmas. Now, this is a film that, if you saw my video where I was talking about my worst movie theater experiences, and even if you haven't seen that video, I'm just going to give you a little rundown of why this film was tainted for me for many years. First time I saw this movie was actually in the theater. I saw it in 35mm in a double feature with Silent Night, Deadly Night. And the reason why the film was tainted for me was because the audio was so excruciatingly loud. It was painful. I had to cover my ears throughout the majority, actually throughout all of the running time. So my experience with Black Christmas was honestly pretty black. No pun intended. So I didn't really bother seeing the film for many years. But then I picked up a book called Fangoria's 101 Most Unheralded Horror Films. And Black Christmas was one of the films that was included as a part of the book. And so, because of that, I decided to give it another chance. I found the DVD of the film, the Critical Mass release, at a pawn shop when I was living with my dad in Oklahoma City, and I watched it for the first time then, and I was very pleasantly surprised with the film. I actually really liked it. And over the years, I've seen it multiple times, and I've really come to be a really big fan of this film. So it's one of those movies that started out with an experience that was absolutely miserable for me. And ultimately, the film itself turned out to be a film that is honestly one of my favorites of the genre. So, especially from this particular decade of the 1970s. This is easily one of my favorite horror films from the 70s. And I do agree with Dave Alexander here, who calls it a terrifying genre masterpiece. That's honestly a great way to put it. Black Christmas is honestly, a proto-slasher. It's one of the earliest slashers that I can personally think of. Yes, there were a few others in Italy and then some other slasher films that had come out before this, but this is one of the films that really solidified the formula that would be copied for films like John Carpenter's Halloween and popularized with films like Sean S. Cunningham's Friday the 13th and so on all throughout the early 1980s. Now, Black Christmas is directed by Bob Clark, and it's also produced by Bob Clark based on a script by A. Roy Moore. Now, initially, I remember hearing that Bob Clark had initially planned to maybe have this film take place on Halloween, but he decided against that because he felt that Halloween was just too obvious of a choice to have a horror film take place on that particular holiday. So he went with Christmas instead. But then again, I've heard differing things. I've heard that might be a rumor or that's not necessarily true. But I definitely can see why Bob Clark decided to go with Christmas over any other holiday, because it really does turn such a wholesome and, especially at the time, cherished and deeply Christian holiday into something that is perverted and twisted and snide and dark. And it was honestly a brilliant idea. And I feel that the script by A. Roy Moore, it's sadistic, it's dark, it's bleak, but it really has this tone about it that makes it stand out from a lot of films from that particular era, and even stands out today. It is ruthless. It is full of just snide, cutting remarks, characters who don't give two shits. It's surprisingly offensive, but I think that's honestly in the film's favor. When it's so brazen, you have Margot Kidder's character who's feeding booze to kids and is acting like a total bitch, and you have all these other elements that, and all, you have the house mother of the sorority who's a total drunk, who her whole thing is that she's spending most of the film looking for bottles of booze that she hid throughout the throughout the house. She just squirrels away booze everywhere and any which way but loose, and it's refreshing. It definitely was shocking for 1974, and for in today's PC culture, it's even more refreshing to see a film like this, where it's just like, fuck you, fuck this, we're things are fucked up. Sorority girls, they think about sex, they're not perfect, they swear, they act like sluts sometimes. The house mother isn't a wholesome character. It's something that I really think was very inspired, and it honestly is something that definitely helps the film when it comes to its ending, because the ending is very dark, and if the film had a different tone, that would have not meshed very well with the rest of the movie. But it worked well and it clicked because the whole film is black. It's dark. It lives up to the black in the title. And I definitely want to give A-Roy more credit and Bob Clark credit for really going for the jugular with a lot of the really shocking moments in this film, specifically the phone calls by Billy. Those still make my skin crawl to this day, no matter how many times I've seen this film. When I hear the just manic phone calls that are just full of just all kinds of profanity and just really creepy shit, with two different voices. You have the male voice and a female voice. It's just incredibly unsettling. And like I said, it doesn't matter how many times I see this film, those phone calls still make me cringe. They still make me get all wound up and tense. I also feel that the script by A-Roy Moore really did a phenomenal job in building the suspense, and Bob Clark, his direction in this is absolutely fantastic. There are so many shots in this film. There's the POV shots early in the movie, which John Carpenter would further popularize in Halloween, which honestly, before Black Christmas, you rarely ever saw that kind of shot ever from the point of view of the killer. The way that he shot sequences, like when the first victim gets suffocated with a plastic bag, and the image of her just in a rocking chair in the attic, just sitting there. The shot of Billy where you just, like, which is shown on this cover, where you just see his eye. You don't see anything else. You see he's in the shadows. He's got the weapon. He brings it down. The one shot that's just of just Billy's eye in a door frame is terrifying. And there are multiple other shots in this film by Bob Clark that are equally as impressive. And this was an early film in his career. And he was also taking a risk, because this is when he moved to Canada and was like, you know what? I want to make the films I want to make in Canada, because I'm not having the same luck in the United States. It also features a nice atmospheric score by Carl Zitterer. This is not a score that I would like listen to on a loop or anything, but it's got this nice dissonance to it, and it fits rather well with the film, because the film's an off-key type movie. So it makes sense that you have a score that is also off-key. Cinematography of Reginald H. Morris, not Moorish. The score by him. I mean, not the score, the cinematography. Sorry. What is up with you? Come on. I guess my brain's turning black talking about this movie. Anyway, the cinematography is quite lavish at times for a film like this. Especially like the way that a lot of the shots are shot when it comes to showing off the house where majority of the action takes place. Even in places like the switching station, where you have the guy who's trying to trace the call and so on and so forth, which is just this endless row of machines, which is definitely something that we don't really have now, which made for a really great shot in the film, because it's just such that entire room with all these rows of machines is just very, I personally thought was really memorable, because it was just like a maze, and it made the guy's plight trying to run around and get the trace to the phone call even more intense, because of the fact that he's having to go through this labyrinth of machines and figure out which one is which in time. And it makes you really appreciate the type of things we have nowadays when it comes to our cell phones and all of that. Like, we don't have to deal with that. Like, if we're trying to trace a phone call or we're trying to do these other things, you don't have to rely solely upon human ability and human error, or lack thereof, because that's how you're going to be able to get the phone call to be traced. And in an instance like this, it's technically a life or death, so you can't really afford to have some guy running around and getting lost trying to figure out where he needs to go. So, but there's even other shots in the film, like this iconic image of the woman with the bag over her face. I know some of you think, oh, it's not really a big deal, but the way that the sequences are shot, especially in the end sequences, where it's got this pans out, you got to zoom in on her in the attic, and then it pans slowly out, and you just see that little reflection of her dead body and the plastic bag over her face in the attic window. It's just those are some really impressive shots in terms of the cinematography, and I really felt that Bob Clark and Reginald H. Morris really did work very well with one another. And definitely want to give Stan Cole, the editor, a lot of credit too, because this is a pretty tight film. Like the tagline says, if this movie doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight. It's fitting that this film has some really tight editing, considering the film's tagline. It doesn't drag. There aren't any sequences or shots in this that feel like they should have been cut down or should have been edited in a different way in order to enhance the suspense or to enhance the horror. So, yeah, I think the editing is excellent in this film as well. It features a running time about 98 minutes, and because of the editing, because of how well it's written, and because of the overall refreshing tone of the film, and how well it builds suspense and mystery, because it doesn't really give away at all really who Billy truly is. You never really find out who this guy is. You just hear his voice on the phone making these sadistic phone calls, and you see little bits and pieces of his face, but other than that, you don't see much else. I mean, the closest image you got of him was with the shot that's featured on this cover art, where you see him in the sequence where he kills Margot Kidder's character, which is another example of great cinematography and direction by Bob Clark. I love how that sequence is shot with just an extreme close-up on Billy just stabbing the bed, and it's also got a dreamlike quality to it because the bedroom has all these crystals in it. And it's just a really unique shot, and definitely a big fan of that particular sequence. And all the characters, for the most part, I thought were likable enough, so then it wasn't this just string of characters who I'm just waiting to die one by one. Particularly, I really liked Olivia Hussey as Jess Bradford, who was the lead in the film. Arguably one of the first Final Girls, if you think about it. Keir, I also thought he was honestly pretty impressive as Peter. You might know him from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Here in this, he plays a completely different type of role. And I thought he pulled off the descent into madness really well, too. And the film did a great job throwing him in as a red herring. Margot Kidder is an absolute riot as Barb. She's a total bitch, but she's entertaining. She's got just so much charisma, and you can't help but really be drawn to any scene that she is in because of that. She's brazen. She really does not give a fuck, and it's a lot of fun to watch. I have to be honest. John Saxon, he's in fine form as usual as Lieutenant Kenneth Fuller, who's essentially the straight guy. He's a straight man, police officer to a lot of these more crazy hijinks and to the over-the-top nature of the film at times. Marian Waldman as Mrs. McHenry, Mrs. Mac, who is the house mother of the sorority. I also really enjoyed her performance. Just like Margot Kidder, this is a character that is full of energy and vigor and is refreshing because she's so counter to the culture at the time and even to the culture today. Andrea Martin, who you might recognize from Second City Television, she plays a rather subdued role here. Apparently she was making everybody crack up on the set, but she's not really the jokey character. She plays a pretty straightforward character here that isn't comic relief, and honestly shows that she's a better actress than she might get credit for because of how well she was able to play this type of role as Phyllis, who's not a class clown, who's not somebody like Barb, who she could have done that really well too because she's an excellent comedic actress. So it showed how good her acting chops were early on in her career, and it's a shame it didn't seem like she really got to do that much else other than Second City TV and a few other comedy projects after that. You also have Nick Mancuso, who does the voice of Billy, and he does a really great job embodying this just total psychopath. Art Hindle, in one of his first roles as Chris Hayden, who is the boyfriend of the woman, Claire, who is the first victim. She's the first one to die. She's the one that gets the bag put over her head and gets suffocated. And you have a few other actors and actresses. You know, James Edmond, who plays Mr. Harrison. Michael Rapport, who plays Patrick Cornell. Les Carlson, who plays Bill Graham. And Bob Clark, apparently, in one scene, played Billy's shadow. Now, I definitely want to mention once again how surprisingly humorous this film is. Not only do you have the stuff with Barb, but you have some really... Well, she's a big part of this scene, too, where she goes to the police station and she gives this clueless police officer a phone number, which is fellatio. And she's fucking with the guy, but he doesn't know any better. And so when he gives the number to his fellow police officers, they're just cracking up. And it's a really fun moment. And this film, in my opinion, is masterful at providing some much needed levity. This is a very dark film. This is a film that deals with some very dark subject matter. So it makes sense for it to kind of throw in a few scenes here and there that make you laugh, that help ease up on the tension a little bit. But there's not so much of them that it's a comedy, but there's enough there that lightens the mood. So then it prepares you for even more intense sequences, and it makes the intense sequences and moments in the film where it's trying to be full of just nail-biting suspense all the more suspenseful, because the film never really had a moment where the suspense petered out or it ran out of steam, because it knew when to take a break before it went back to the gut-wrenching and just intense events that would occur throughout the film. So it's one of those films that I feel is a masterclass of that. I think a lot of people should look at Black Christmas to look at how you can make a film with subject matter that is this dark and sadistic and have it be all the more effective because of the use of pinpoint perfect moments of levity, which is something that I don't feel is mentioned nearly enough when it comes to criticism and when it comes to when people are talking about this particular film. It has a budget of about $620,000. $620 million would have been crazy, right? That would have been insane. No, $620,000. It's perfect, like, because I've been flubbing my way throughout this entire review. I'm not editing anything out. So you all could just deal with that. That's what happens sometimes, you just do live, a stream of consciousness. Nobody's perfect. But $620,000, which isn't a whole lot of money, but the filmmakers and the crew, they really did a great job getting the most out of that budget, and I really do feel that that's kind of a lost art, especially nowadays, because a lot of films have, especially feature films, they have these big budgets. So even small budget films like Deadpool had over $50 million to work with. So it's really a testament to really the drive and determination of of your fellow man and woman to have a budget as low as $620,000 and turn in a film that looks like it cost a lot more than that, especially back in 1974. This doesn't look like a cheap film, especially with the cinematography and with how a lot of sequences are shot and directed. So it's not one of those movies that looks like it's a low-budget exploitation film. It looks like a mid-budget film for the time. And that's a testament to the people that were involved with the production, to their passion and to their ability to rise above the lower budget that they had going for them. So it's one of those things that, yeah, it's a low budget independent film that looks like a bigger budget, or at least a mid-budget film for 1974, and it's a film that still holds up really well to this day. I honestly don't have too many issues with Black Christmas. In fact, I can't think of any off the top of my head, to be honest. I think it's really well put together. I think the structure of the film is about as close to perfect as you could possibly get. I know there's some people who don't care for the characters, and to each their own. And if you don't care for the characters, then I think that definitely will hurt the film for you. Definitely make it a lot less suspenseful and tense, or a lot less enjoyable. And some people aren't a fan of the tone, but for me, these are all things that are reasons why the film is as excellent as it is, why it's as dynamic and memorable as it has been for so many fans for so many years. So this is the film that really showed that, hey, those Canadians, they can turn out a quality horror classic with the best of them. So, the only thing I want to talk about real quick is this Blu-ray Collector's Edition by Scream Factory. Once again, huge thanks goes out to Jonathan Lindsay for sending me this Blu-ray. You have reversible cover art, so you have the original cover art here with the iconic image of Lynne Griffin with a bag over her head. The features on this are a little bit of a letdown. The 2K scan, it's the best I've personally seen the film. It still looks a little bit, I would say, not as pristine or as clear as some of the other prints because of that you've seen with Scream Factory or with other companies. I think that's because of the print that was available. The print that they had available was from the 70s, so it's understandable that it might not look as good as a print from the 80s or 90s. Prints age, they do have that problem. So there were some things that had to be done to try to clean it up a little bit. And it kind of shows at times. But it's still a pretty solid print for a film this old. And definitely an improvement over the DVD and the original Blu-ray transfer, which is nowhere near as clear. The features, it puts all of the features that were on the original Critical Mass release, which are still sadly the best features. That's what's honestly kind of disappointing about this, is that the old featurettes, the old interviews, are still the best special features for this film, because in terms of new stuff, all you got was new interview with Art Hindle, and you got a new interview with Lynne Griffin. And they included the Black Christmas Legacy feature that was on the Canadian release special edition, the Season's Greetings edition of the film. And to me, that edition, that feature is honestly not that great. It doesn't really provide that much in terms of behind the scenes. It doesn't provide, honestly, any of that. I mean, maybe a couple things, but not very much at all. And it's exactly what it says it is. It's about legacy. It's about the legacy of the film. So it's more about people kind of doing a video essay about the legacy of the film, and that's just not very interesting or as entertaining to me. Multiple different critics and multiple different people talking about the film and so on and so forth, and why it's endured for so long. And for me, that's something that is interesting for 5 to 10 minutes, not over 40 minutes long. So that it just came across as a fluff piece, and it just wasn't really for me. The other features that are there, they're fine, and it's nice to see that the other older features are also included on this set. And if you like the older print of the film that's on the original Critical Mass release, it's also included in this set as well. But, I mean, I can't really complain too much, and this was a gift, and the new 2K transfer is admittedly better than the Critical Mass original release. So, if you're a fan of Black Christmas, definitely pick this Blu-ray up sometime if you haven't already. And I don't really know what to say about the film, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, like I said, I don't really have any clear, really big issues with this film. I mean, I can't even think of any off the top of my head, because I personally feel it's well paced, it's got a good story, the performances by the cast are all really solid, the direction by Bob Clark is honestly pretty spectacular visually, as well as how he handles everything involved with the production. Cinematography is gorgeous. The editing is tight and effective. The score is not necessarily the most memorable thing in the world, but I don't think that was the point here. It provides the atmosphere and the mood that it was intended to provide. Yeah, I don't really find anything wrong with Black Christmas. If I were to rate out of 5 stars, I give it 5 out of 5 because I honestly don't really find anything that doesn't really work that well when it comes to this movie. And it's one of those rare films from this particular genre that has an ending that's depressing, but I don't mind it because I feel the film earned it and it works. So yeah, big fan of this film, and it's one of those films that I will never forget because of my initial experience with the movie. So it would always be a part of me in that instance. And it's also one of those films that is a testament to giving something another chance. If your experience with a film wasn't the best the first time around, don't let that deter you from giving it a second shot. Because if I did that, I would have never seen this film, and I would have never added this film to my best list. I would have never seen the movie, and I would have never grown to appreciate and love the film. And that would have been an absolute shame. So anyway, thank you for watching my review of Black Christmas, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.